And what up, you guys? Welcome back to Pro Publications YouTube channel. It's me, Rich. Daily uploads to open up my own shop. And as you can tell from that first image, Rob Liefeld made some comments that a lot of people seem to have a problem with. I am not one of those people, even as someone who's trying to open up a comic book store currently. Rob Liefeld basically saying that direct-to-consumer model is going to be the future of comics, that comic book shops and the supply chain that feeds it is obsolete. That's ultimately Thinking Critical's kind of like assessment on what Rob Liefeld said. And I want to just clearly state that I think Rob Liefeld is correct. That direct-to-consumer model definitely serves the readers better, will serve the creators better, and will kind of cut out all the riffraff from the comic book industry. Now, does that mean that there's no place for supply chain management that can feed comic book stores? No, that's not what it means. And does that mean that comic book shops shouldn't exist, that they're also obsolete? That's not at all what it means. What it means is that the current state of the supply chain, right, so the distribution channels that comic book stores have, that system is not sustainable and needs to change. Comic book shops and the way they have existed and the way they are existing currently is not sustainable. That model needs to change. And that's what I'm trying to do, right? That's what a lot of folks are trying to do. We're not just spectators, right? We're participators. We can get active in this, right? I didn't like what was being published. I wanted something just more strange, different, weird, right? And so I started Feral Publication. I wanted something that was more aggressively different. So then I made something aggressively different. And that's the thing, like, we're not just spectators, we're participators. We have the tools in our hands and are able to execute the way we see fit. And with that being said, what I envision comic book shops need to be is definitely a third space. It's a place to build community. It's a place for people to show up and have a library, have a cup of coffee, talk, discuss, different aspects of this thing that unites us all, right? This love and like of this art form, of this art style, of these thoughts, philosophical or emotional, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? All these different intersections is what we meet up at, right? This third space, this comic book shop, and that's what comic book shops need to be, but that's not what they are. Like, I've gone to 3 different shops in the last month, and like, there's nowhere to sit, there's no one talking, there's nothing to drink. Like, it's like, show up, get a comic, get the fuck out. And it's like, I wonder how many comic book shops are like that. Like, every comic book shop should have a drink and draw, right? Some variation, right? Maybe not all of them can have alcohol, right? I wouldn't mind having a cup of coffee and sitting down and making comics with folks. Like, that sounds like a damn good time to me. But these comic book shops don't do that. And that's what I think needs to change. And so when I hear Rob Liefeld talking about direct to consumer, he's talking about it from the perspective of a creative. You think about how many publishers shorthand the creatives. When you think about how many supply chains and comic book shops and everyone has to take their dollar, by the end result of it all, you've almost priced out everybody who would have went and bought a comic. When you do that, what you end up doing is putting a strain on the reader. And the idea, like, for myself, like I always talk about, I don't want to price anybody out from reading what I want to make. The idea is that I want this to be spread far and wide by many people to, people to see it and chew it over and tell me what they love, tell me what they hate. The supply chain, right, the distribution systems definitely put a strain on the comic book shops, and then those comic book shops put that strain back on the reader. And all of this comes at the expense of the creatives being taken advantage of by the publishers, by the creators, right? Not even allowing their foot on the door in a lot of instances, myself included, right? Like, the direct-to-consumer model definitely has its time and place, and I don't think that's going anywhere. And for anyone that isn't aware, there's such a big independent publishing community in the direct-to-consumer space. When you think of all the publishing that has been done direct to consumer that grew to a point where, like, it eventually gets picked up by a distributor, like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, a lot of times these bigger distribution companies won't take a chance until there's a proof of concept, and that's what the direct-to-consumer model really is. Now, what Rob Liefeld did is that he created the most value for the readers with the less tension on the reader. The idea for a creator is like, how do I spread this art far and wide, and how do I make it the least painful process that it can be? And I think that Rob hit it on the nose with his direct-to-consumer model. Like I said, a comic book shop shouldn't be a place where you only get comic books from, because guess what? You get comic books from anywhere. You get comic books from Amazon, Walmart, like there's so many other places you could get comic books from. Barnes and Nobles, right? The idea of the comic book shop should be more than just that. And it's grown stagnant. And again, the distribution channels isn't really at the benefit of the comic book shops, and much less at the benefit of the readers. Comic book shops, distribution channels, all these things aren't going anywhere, but the way they exist has to change. And that's what we're up to, man. We're trying to change that, right? But that's all I got for you guys today, man. I saw that video and I just felt like I needed to talk about that. So with that being said, I definitely dig Rob Liefeld as an artist, as a person. On the few occasions that I met him, he was very gracious towards me. And then on top of that, as a businessman, I think Homeboy has some business acumen that a lot of people lack. I think he's actually pretty clever. But beyond that, don't forget there will be a link in the show notes to connect you to feralpublication.com, where you guys get the zines, buttons, stickers, and t-shirts that I make. Please like, share, subscribe, and I do this daily. So guess what? I'll see you tomorrow. Lates.